You know, we all think we know the deal with nicotine, but what if I told you its story is way more complex than just addiction? Today, we're diving into a hidden metabolic plot twist, one that really gets to the core of how our bodies manage energy. We're about to uncover nicotine's two very, very different faces.
So let's start with this question. What if nicotine's biggest threat isn't the one we've all been warned about? We usually connect it with that short-term buzz, maybe even some weight control. But what if the long-term reality is the total opposite? A story of visceral fat and cellular breakdown. Let's dig in.
And to get a sense of the scale we're talking about, just look at this number. Over 1 billion people around the globe use nicotine on a regular basis. That's more than 1 out of every 8 people on the entire planet. So yeah, this is not some niche issue. It's a massive global metabolic story that's unfolding right now.
So what is nicotine really? Well, at its core, it's a stimulant alkaloid. It's found naturally in the tobacco plant, and people consume it in all sorts of ways, right? We're talking traditional cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and of course, all the modern stuff. E-cigarettes, vapes, and even nicotine replacement things like gums and patches. But no matter the method, the result is the same. It lights up your central nervous system.
All right, let's talk about the first phase of nicotine, that immediate short-term boost. This is the effect that gets all the attention, and honestly, for a little while, it can even seem like it's doing something good.
The second that nicotine hits your system, it basically flips a switch on your sympathetic nervous system, and you probably know that as your fight-or-flight response. It's getting your body ready for action, ramping up your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your whole metabolic rate.
And this kicks off a pretty powerful chain reaction. First, nicotine tells your adrenal glands to pump out epinephrine. You know it as adrenaline. Then, that adrenaline sends a message to your fat cells, telling them, hey, release your stored energy. This whole process is called lipolysis, and it floods your bloodstream with fatty acids, all ready to be used as fuel.
And this is why you always hear about nicotine being linked to weight control or weight loss. This revved-up fat metabolism seems like a good thing, but you gotta notice the most important part of that sentence, at least in the short term, because this, folks, is only half the story.
So now let's flip the coin over. Because when this exposure isn't just a one-time thing, when it becomes chronic, the whole narrative just flips on its head. And what we get is a really dangerous metabolic paradox.
And here it is, the central conflict. Short-term, nicotine tells your body to break down fat. But long-term, it does the exact opposite. It actually encourages your existing fat cells to grow larger. And it specifically favors the absolute most dangerous kind of fat you can have.
So how on earth does that happen? Well, with chronic nicotine use, your mitochondria, those are your tiny cellular powerhouses, they get damaged. They become way less efficient at burning those very fatty acids that were just released. So the net effect is that the fat just gets stored again instead of being burned. And even worse, it tends to build up as visceral fat, that deep inflammatory fat that wraps around your internal organs.
To really get this, we've got to zoom in. I mean, way in, down to the molecular level. Because this is where we can actually see nicotine committing cellular sabotage, throwing a wrench into one of the most critical signaling systems in your entire body. Okay, meet our main culprit. It's a type of fat molecule called a ceramide. Now, ceramides are supposed to be there. They have jobs to do in our cells. But when you're chronically exposed to nicotine, they start to build up. And when they do, they become these powerful little disruptors of cellular communication.
Let's think of it like this. Imagine insulin's job is to go up to a cell and knock on the door. It's carrying a message that says, hey, there's glucose in the blood, you need to let it in for energy. It's a simple, super important message. Open up. Now, inside that cell, for the door to actually open, a special protein named ACT has to hear the knock and give the command. If ACT doesn't answer the door, it stays shut, no matter how hard insulin is knocking.
And here's where the sabotage comes in. Chronic nicotine use directly causes these ceramide molecules to pile up inside the cell. They just start accumulating, gumming up all the internal wiring.
And here's the knockout punch. These ceramides directly block ACT. They basically put noise-canceling headphones on it so it can't hear insulin's knock. The signal is sent, but it is never, ever received. So the door stays locked, glucose gets stuck in the blood, and that right there is how a cell becomes insulin resistant.
Oh, but it gets even worse. Nicotine also activates these specific inflammatory receptors on the cell's surface. Think of them like little alarm bells. When these alarms get tripped, they tell the cell to make even more ceramides.
This creates this horrible, self-sustaining feedback loop. More inflammation makes more ceramides, which makes more insulin resistance, which then fuels even more inflammation. It's a vicious cycle.
So, as we pull back out, you can really see the whole picture. Nicotine isn't just one thing. It's a profoundly two-sided stimulant, and it has these completely conflicting effects on our metabolism.
At the end of the day, the bottom line is this. That initial tempting boost in fat burning, it's just a mask. And underneath that mask, chronic exposure is quietly and completely rewiring your metabolism for dysfunction, promoting fat storage, insulin resistance, and inflammation.
And that brings us right back to today. With the explosion in vaping, especially among younger people, it really forces us to ask a critical question about our future health. Are we, without even realizing it, walking straight into a new and widespread metabolic storm? It's something to think about.